Okay, so we're showing how to set up Switchboard from an existing Unreal project. What I'll do here is I'm actually going to open up an Unreal project just straight from P4V. We'll go to this shared directory that's over here. I'm just going to open up this one here, LSU base template.u project. Okay, while it's loading, we've also made a little batch file here to set up P4V. I've already done this, but I'll go ahead and double click on it again. It asks a couple things. So it asks, what is your username? In P4V, what we can do is we can copy these values from our workspaces window. If you don't have your workspaces window up, you can get to it pretty easily by going to View Workspaces and double clicking on it. And then we can double click this owner field. I'm just alt-tabbing over to here and pasting it in. What is your P4V host? So triple click that, paste it in, workspace, triple click, copy, paste it in. And then this actually sets up your P4 config file for you. In the P4 config file, it basically sets up that P4 ignore in addition to a P4 port, P4 user, P4 host, P4 client, etc. The P4 ignore file has that located in it. Okay, I'm going to close out of these windows here. Inside of Unreal, let's say this is the scene you want to hook up to Switchboard. You do have to make sure you have the Switchboard plugin enabled. And what you can do now is hit the little triple dot and go to Create Config next to the Switchboard icon. And it is helpful to give this config a name. Also, otherwise it gives it an automatic name, which you can make very little sense out of. So in here, what I tend to do is I tend to call it the same as the project name. So this is LSU base template spelled like that. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll just put like a little date code or something after it. So 2023, 2302, and the time is 15 actually. Okay, and then where it says use localhost, I'm going to uncheck that because we are going to use Switchboard across 2 computers, and I'll press OK. And we'll let it pop up. The nice thing about this is that it reads in the render node from our end-display config. Now what we can do is we can go to Settings over here, and we can turn on a couple things, primarily source control. That workspace name we're going to get from that same window. So again, double-click in P4V this thing. So we'll copy that workspace name. I'm going to Alt-tab over to here, and I'm going to put the workspace name in where it says workspace name. Perforce project path, this one's a little bit curious. But what we're going to do is, again, double-click that workspace, and we're going to copy everything up to that slash, and including the 2 slashes here, and we're going to copy that. And then that way we can go back over here and paste that in over there. And for some reason, Switchboard just assumes that we have the same workspace name for our render node as well as our operator. We don't, so on our render node, the workspace name is the same thing, but it's render, looks like that. And this is render here, looks like that. Whoops. Let me just double check that came across. Yep, so that looks good. And that should be it. So I'll go ahead and click close, which saves everything. On my render node, I am going to make sure I get latest on this particular folder. So make sure it's highlighted and say get latest. Over here, and actually probably before you get latest, what you want to make sure you do is you click add. It'll say a bunch of things are ignored. That's good. And then you'll say submit. I've already submitted, so there's nothing to submit. And that way on the render node, you'll get latest. And then make sure on the render node you also run that setconfig.batch file. Don't run it from inside P4V. You have to show an explorer and double click it. And just make sure you do that on your render node. All right. once that's done, also on the render node, you should be able to disconnect, reconnect without errors. And then it says it needs to be synced, so I'll go ahead and sync them both at the same time. And then in terms of launching, we'll make sure that multi-user server will launch on its own. You can manually launch it by clicking this button. So I can do that. You do get a little warning here that you can ignore. Warning, running server does not match configuration. That's because there is no session yet. So once I launch this, it'll, oops, wrong button. Make sure you launch it here. So once you launch the editor, it will have the right session that pops up under active sessions. So we'll give that a second to launch. Oh, you also want to make sure you don't have the Unreal project open. You'll get confused as to which project to use, because one will be in a multi-user session and one will not be. So we'll close out of all the Unreal instances and let it launch. So it'll come up here, it'll say joining session, created session. We can confirm this over here. So here's our active session. We have our clients over here in the multi-user server slate. We have server, admin, and editor 1. Then what we can do is we can launch on node 1, or sorry, node 0. And sometimes on node 0, it'll crash. There's an error that pops up that talks about an end display file it cannot find. I find that if you just launch it again, it tends to work. If sometimes it crashes again, I've had to launch it up to like 5 or 6 times before. So we'll keep clicking it. Not ideal, but eventually will launch. Cool. So it's launched. We have tracking. We can move stuff around in our multi-user session. So if I move this around, it moves on our render node. And if we look at our multi-user server over here, we can see some stats. We have our editor over here. We have our node 0 over here. You can enable logging. And you're ready to go.